UFC Fight Night Blanchfield versus Fiorot is this Saturday. For each fight, including the prelims, I'm going to give a brief introduction to each fighter, compare their stats, review their recent fight history, analyze the results of each of my 7 data science prediction models, give a combined weighted prediction of those models, and then give my final prediction, which considers both quantitative and qualitative information combined. Hopefully you can use these predictions and data to confirm your picks, avoid mistakes, and find some value bets, or just for entertainment and informative purposes to prepare you for this event. Please like and subscribe if you find this interesting, informative, or helpful, as it helps keep me motivated in creating these videos for you all. Running this data and analysis, each of the prediction models, the fight simulations, charts, and graphs, and updating the site takes hours every day and week, so I'd really appreciate the support. And thank you all to everyone who has shown recent support. I can't believe I'm at over 300 subscribers now. I was just at over 200, so that's truly insane to me, and it means the world that we can all share our passion for MMA and build a community. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alright, for the first fight, we have Angel Pacheco versus Caolan Loughran. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Angel Pacheco is from Brazil and is known for his aggressive striking and relentless pursuit of victory. He often overwhelms his opponents with an immediate barrage of attacks. Then we have Caolan Loughran from Northern Ireland, who brings a different flavor to the fight with his technical boxing and solid ground game. Loughran is a master at finding openings and exploiting them, whether it's with precise punches or strategic grappling. Both Pacheco and Loughran have carved out their own paths in MMA, showcasing their unique skills and determination to climb to the top. Now let's take a look at their stats. Just to give you guys some context, their stats come from one fight each. We've got Angel Pacheco standing at 5 feet 8 inches tall with a reach of 70 inches. At 32 years old, Pacheco's stats showcase a high striking volume, averaging 13.13 significant strikes landed per minute with an accuracy of 40%. However, his striking defense appears to be a concern, absorbing 13.6 significant strikes per minute with a striking defense of 35%. On the other side, Caolan Loughran stands slightly shorter at 5 feet 6 inches and is the younger fighter at 27 years old. His reach is just under Pacheco's at 68 inches. Loughran has a lower striking output, with 3.2 strikes landed per minute and a 36% striking accuracy, but he shows a better defense, absorbing fewer strikes at 5.6 per minute at a higher defensive rate at 48%. Loughran also shows some grappling initiative with a takedown average of 2 per 15 minutes and a takedown accuracy of 18%. Now let's check out how Angel Pacheco performed in that one fight. He lost via unanimous decision to Danny Silva at Dana White's Contender Series in September 2023. Both fighters threw about the same number of strikes, but Danny Silva's 2 takedowns and 1 knockdown made the difference. Prior to this fight against Danny Silva, he fought at CFFC, Bud Brawl, CES, CFX, and some other promotions. Although it may not seem like it, Angel Pacheco has the ability to put up a high volume of strikes, and he also has finishing capabilities, both on the feet and on the mat. His total record is 7 wins and 2 losses, in which 5 of his wins are via KO/TKO and 2 are via submission. He aims to finish fights and is fully capable of doing so. Now let's check out how his opponent, Caolan Loughran, has performed in his most recent UFC fight. Loughran, like Pacheco, faced a defeat in his last outing on September 2023 against Taylor Lapilus in UFC Fight Night Gone vs. Spivak. He was outstruck, landing 48 to Lapilus's 84 significant strikes, but he was able to land 2 takedowns. The fight concluded with a unanimous decision loss for Loughran. Prior to that fight, he fought at Cage Warriors, where he racked up 4 wins, even defeating Dylan Hazan for the CWFC Vacant Bantamweight Championship. He also is fully capable of finishing fights. Both fighters share a similar vulnerability against opponents that are strategic, who can weather the storm early on and take the fight to the distance. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to run both of these fighters through the prediction models. However, the odds probabilities point towards a confident 72% probability of victory for Caolan Loughran. Considering the statistical insights and the tendencies of each fighter, the most likely method of victory could be a decision in Loughran's favor. Loughran has shown that he can endure the fight's duration, and with his superior defensive stats, he could outlast Pacheco, who seems to be more prone to absorbing hits, to secure a victory on the judges' scorecards. I think that this will be a fun, explosive fight. In the next fight, we have Andre Petroski versus Jacob Malkoun. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Andre Petroski is from the United States and is recognized for his grappling skills and powerful ground game. He's skilled at controlling opponents on the mat and working towards submissions or dominant positions to secure the win. Across from him, Jacob Malkoun is from Australia and is known for his boxing and wrestling combination, making him a versatile competitor who can handle himself both on the feet and on the ground. Malkoun's strategy often involves using his strikes to set up takedowns, where he then can apply his wrestling skills to control the fight. With Petroski's submission threat and Malkoun's all-around game, this matchup is sure to be a showcase of mixed martial arts versatility. Now let's take a look at their stats. Andrei Petroski is solid at 6 feet tall with a reach of 73 inches. At 32 years old, he's throwing a decent 3.61 significant strikes per minute with a 51% accuracy. Defensively, he's absorbing just over 3 strikes per minute and has a striking defense at 51%. Petroski also brings a strong grappling game, averaging 4.48 takedowns per 15 minutes with a 54% accuracy, and his submission average per 15 minutes is kinda high at 2.5. On the other hand, Jacob Malkoun, slightly shorter at 5 feet 9 inches, shares the same reach as Petroski at 73 inches and is younger by 4 years. Malkoun lands an average of 3.89 significant strikes per minute with a better accuracy at 56%. He absorbs fewer strikes at 2.49 per minute, and his striking defense is just a notch below at 50%. However, Malkoun shows significant grappling stats with an impressive 7.2 takedown average, although his submission average is notably lower at 0.5. Now let's check out how Andrei Petroski has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Petroski's recent fight history shows a varied performance. He suffered a loss to Michael Pereira via KO/TKO in the first round, which could indicate vulnerability in his striking defense. However, prior to that, Petroski had wins against Gerald Meerschaert and Wellington Turman, both by decision, showcasing his resilience and capacity to control the fights over the distance. His victories over Nick Maximov and Hu Yaozong by anaconda choke and arm triangle submissions, respectively, show that he has technical grappling skills and finishing ability as well. Now let's check out how his opponent Jacob Malkoun has performed in his most recent fights. Malkoun's record is a bit of a roller coaster with 2 losses and 3 wins. Notably, his unanimous decision victory over Nick Maximov, AJ Dobson, and Abdul Razak Al-Hassan shows his ability to outlast opponents. His solid grappling is evident in his fight against AJ Dobson, with an impressive 6 takedowns. His loss against Cody Brundage was due to disqualification, and he also had a unanimous decision loss to Brendan Allen. He hasn't been much of a finisher recently, but he can definitely control fights. Now let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. The odds have Jacob Malkoun as the favorite, which 3 of the 7 prediction models agree with. The most confident prediction for Malkoun comes from the neural network model at 73%, while the linear regression and logistic regression models are nearly split evenly between the 2 fighters, with only hundredths of a decimal making the difference. Interestingly, the 1,000 fight simulations heavily favor Petroski at 89%. The other 3 models that picked Petroski just barely gave him the victory, ranging from 50 to 51%. When you weigh the models together, the prediction tips in Malkoun's favor at 55% over Petroski's 45%. My final prediction, just slightly higher than the weighted prediction, is that Jacob Malkoun has a 58% chance of winning. The edge comes from Malkoun's superior striking accuracy, lower strike absorption, and good takedown defense. Assuming he can maintain his defensive skills and exploit Petroski's recent vulnerability to strikes, Malkoun might secure a win, potentially through a unanimous decision, considering his stats and his recent fight trends. In the next fight, we have Viktoriia Dudakova versus Melissa Gatto. Let me give you a brief introduction to these two. Viktoriia Dudakova, making waves out of Russia, brings a disciplined and technical approach to her fights, often leveraging her judo background to control the pace and positioning in her fights. She's known for her ability to execute throws and maintain top control, making her a tough puzzle to solve inside the octagon. On the other side, we have Melissa Gatto from Brazil, who shines with her Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills, creating a threat on the ground with her submission attempts. Gatto's game is all about finding an opening for a finish, whether she's standing or on the mat, showcasing a dynamic and opportunistic fighting style. Dudakova and Gatto each bring their unique styles to the table, promising an intriguing matchup with plenty of technical skills on display. Now let's take a look at their stats. Viktoriia Dudakova stands at 5 feet 5 inches tall, 2 years younger than her opponent at 25, with a reach of 67 inches. She lands an impressive 3.14 significant strikes per minute at a 52% accuracy and absorbs slightly less at 2.45 strikes per minute. Dudakova's striking defense is at an even 50%, And she also demonstrates a notable grappling aspect to her game with a takedown average of 2.45 at 41% accuracy, although her takedown defense is also at 50%. Melissa Gatto is also 5 feet 5 inches, and she's 27 years old. She has a reach of 69 inches. Gatto lands more significant strikes per minute at 3.98, but with a slightly lower accuracy of 48%. She absorbs more than she lands at 3.13 strikes per minute, but has a slightly better defense at 54%. Gatto's grappling stats show a lower takedown average of 1.18, but a higher defense at 63%, and she averages a small number of submissions per 15 minutes at 0.3. Now let's take a look at how Viktoriia Dudakova performed in her most recent UFC fights. Dudakova has been on a 3-fight winning streak, showcasing her ability to dominate fights with a balanced approach. Her recent win over Jin Yu Frey by unanimous decision after 3 full rounds displays her endurance and skill in striking. Prior to that, she finished Estela Nunes in the first round, demonstrating her power and precision as well. These performances highlight her ability to control the pace of the fight and her finishing ability. Now let's check out how her opponent, Melissa Gatto, has performed in her most recent UFC fights. Gatto has had a mixture of outcomes in her last 4 fights, with 2 losses followed by 2 wins. Despite the losses, Gatto's fight against Ariana Lipski showed that she could endure a tough battle and outstrike Lipski. Her victories by knockout against Sijara Eubanks and Victoria Leonardo, although from 2021, exhibit her striking ability and suggest that when she finds her rhythm, she can be a dangerous finisher. Let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. The odds and models show a competitive forecast with a preference towards Gatto. Linear regression and random forest models give a nearly even chance to both of these fighters. The neural network and 1000 fight simulations strongly favor Dudakova. When you weigh all of the models together, Dudakova comes out on top with a 59% probability to Gatto's 41%. I don't think she'll win as confidently as the models are predicting, as she hasn't really faced notable opponents, and her lower striking and takedown defense paired with Gatto's reach lead me to believe that this will be a challenging fight for her. She's the underdog, but I have to go with her. My final prediction predicts Viktoriia Dudakova gets the job done with a very narrow 50.4% probability. I think she has the ability to pull off the upset here, but I won't give her a confident chance of doing so. She's been accurate with her strikes and absorbs less than Gatto, also has twice as many takedowns on average, with twice as good accuracy. Let's not forget her total record is 8 wins and no losses, with 2 TKO victories and 4 submission victories. I think she could likely pull off a win here, possibly through a decision if she can keep up her striking accuracy and defense while managing Gatto's reach advantage and her striking volume. However, if Gatto leverages her reach and lands significant strikes effectively, she could tip the balance in her favor. In the next fight, we have Ibo Aslan versus Anton Turkalj, which is actually a rematch between these two fighters. They fought each other back in August 2020 at Brave CF 40, where Anton Turkalj submitted Ibo Aslan via rear naked choke in the second round. But before we dive in, let me give you a brief introduction to these fighters. Ibo Aslan is from Turkey, and he's a fighter known for his aggressive striking and his never back down attitude. He's got a knack for pushing the pace and keeping his opponents on their toes with powerful combinations. On the flip side, we've got Anton Turkalj from Sweden, who mixes it up with a versatile skill set that includes a strong grappling foundation complemented by his striking capabilities. Anton is skilled at adapting his strategy mid-fight, showcasing a well-rounded game that keeps his adversaries guessing. Both Aslan and Turkalj bring their own flavor to this fight, which sets the stage for a clash of styles. Now let's take a look at their stats. Ibo Aslan towers at 6 feet 3 inches tall with a lengthy reach of 77 inches. It's important to note that Ibo Aslan's stats come from one fight only, which was his Dana White Contender Series fight against Paulo Renato Jr. At 27, Aslan's striking is impressive, throwing a high volume at 8.87 significant strikes per minute at a 72% accuracy. His defensive game is strong too, with a 63% striking defense, although he does absorb 3.38 strikes per minute. In contrast, Anton Turkalj is just an inch taller at 6 feet 4 inches tall and also is 27 years old, with an inch advantage in his reach at 78 inches. His striking game is less active and accurate, landing 1.72 strikes per minute at a 53% accuracy. He absorbs fewer strikes at 2.48 per minute and has a lower striking defense at 49%. Turkalj shows a diverse skill set with a takedown average of 6.55 at 51% accuracy and a 16% takedown defense, but like Aslan, he shows no submissions in his fights. Now let's check out how Ibo Aslan has performed in his most recent UFC fight against Paulo Renato Jr. He had a dominant performance resulting in a first-round knockout. He landed 21 strikes while Renato Jr. could only land 8. He definitely has powerful striking and finishing capability. Prior to that fight, he fought at Vendetta Fight Nights, Sparta Championship, Tosan Fight Night, Brave CF, where he lost to Anton Turkalj, and he had several fights at Austrian Fight Challenge. His total record is 12 wins and only 1 loss. Interestingly, all 12 wins came by KO/TKO, and his only 1 loss was via submission from Turkalj, which is why I love this rematch. Now let's check out how his opponent, Anton Turkalj, has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Turkalj has faced some adversity in his recent outings, with 3 consecutive losses, 1 by knockout from Tyson Pedro, 1 by unanimous decision with Vitor Petrino, and 1 by rear naked choke from Jalton Almeida. He normally has the ability to endure through a fight, and his win against Acacio dos Santos by unanimous decision highlights his ability to perform over the distance of a fight with an active grappling game, as seen by the 11 significant takedowns in that fight. Prior to these fights, he fought at Brave FC where he racked up a few wins, and he had fought in a few other smaller promotions before that. His total record is 8 wins and 3 losses. 5 of his victories were via KO/TKO and 2 were via submission. All 3 of his losses were recent and within the UFC, which isn't the best sign for him, although he has defeated Ibo Aslan before, but a lot can change in this sport in 4 years, or even 4 months, let's be honest. Unfortunately, I couldn't put these 2 fighters through the prediction models due to Ibo Aslan making his UFC debut. The odds give Ibo Aslan a slim margin of victory at 51% to Anton Turkalj's 49%. This razor-thin difference suggests a fight that's expected to be highly competitive. My final prediction aligns with this, and despite the lack of grappling stats for Aslan, his impressive striking output and accuracy might just be the deciding factor in this matchup, assuming he can keep the fight standing and leverage his high striking rate. The most likely method of victory could be a knockout given Aslan's previous performance and Turkalj's recent susceptibility to being finished in fights. And you also have to consider how discouraging 3 back-to-back losses truly are, especially within a 2-year period. He's probably mentally doubting himself a bit, even against an opponent that he beat 4 years ago. Meanwhile, Aslan has been winning and knocking guys out left and right like there's no tomorrow. It's as if a light got fired under him after that one and only loss. Aslan gets it done here, and he finishes Anton Turkalj and makes a statement in his debut. In the next fight, we have Denis Buzukja versus Connor Matthews. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Denis Buzukja brings a striking-focused game with an inclination for dynamic punches and kicks that he's developed in New York. He's made waves with his ability to control the pace and dictate the stand-up exchanges. On the other side, we have Connor Matthews, a fighter from Massachusetts who's not just a striker but also has a solid wrestling base. Matthews combines his striking accuracy with the threat of takedowns, making him unpredictable and a challenge for anyone standing across from him in the cage. Now let's take a look at their stats. Denis Buzukja, with a stature of 5 feet 9 inches, has a reach just above his height at 70 inches. He's 5 years younger than his opponent at 26 years old. Buzukja lands an average of 3.3 significant strikes per minute with a striking accuracy of 43%. He absorbs slightly more than he lands at 4.93 significant strikes per minute, and his striking defense is at 40%. His grappling stats show a takedown average of 0.98 with a 30% accuracy, and he's fairly adept at defending takedowns with a 73% defense rate. His submission average per 15 minutes is modest at 0.3. Connor Matthews, standing an inch shorter at 5 feet 8 inches but with a slightly longer reach of 71 inches, is older at 31 years old. He outperforms Buzukja in striking, landing an average of 5.13 significant strikes per minute at a higher accuracy of 44%. Matthew also has a higher absorption rate at 5.57, but compensates with a better striking defense at 55%. In grappling, Matthew shows a strong takedown game with an average of 3.5 and a 58% accuracy. However, his takedown defense is lower at 50%, and his submission average is higher at 1. Now let's check out how Denis Buzukja has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Buzukja has faced some tough competition, with 3 losses out of his last 4 fights. His most recent fight was a quick defeat by knockout in the first round against Jamall Emmers. His other losses to Sean Woodson and Melsik Baghdasaryan, both by unanimous decision, suggests that he might struggle to dominate in striking. However, Buzukja's win against Caolan Romero, where he showcased his versatility and outstruck Romero, highlights his potential. Not the best UFC record though, let's be honest. It's important to note that he used to fight in Ring of Combat, then he got a chance at Melsik Baghdasaryan at Dana White's Contender Series back in 2020. Then, that loss brought him back to Ring of Combat until 2022, where he got another chance at Dana White's Contender Series and defeated Romero. Then he had 3 fights, with each one being in a different promotion, leading him to UFC Fight Night Sandhagen vs. Font in August 2023, where he then lost to Sean Woodson, and then lost again in November 2023. So he does good outside of UFC, gets into the UFC, and then struggles. The total record is 11 wins and 4 losses. Most of his wins are by decision, and 4 are KO/TKOs, and only 1 is by submission. Now let's check out how his opponent, Connor Matthews, has performed in his most recent fights. Matthews shows a promising start to his UFC career with a victory in his latest fight, demonstrating a well-rounded skill set by landing significant strikes and executing takedowns, which led to a win against Yair Farias. The loss against Francis Marshall was a unanimous decision loss, so he can go the distance even while being outstruck and taken down 6 times. He actually attempted a submission in that fight. His total record is 7 wins and only 1 loss, with most wins coming from submission and only 1 win coming from KO/TKO. His 1 loss was to Marshall via that unanimous decision. His grappling ability is noteworthy, as he loves that rear naked choke. Unfortunately, I couldn't put these 2 fighters through the prediction models, as Connor Matthews is making his UFC debut. The odds probability is leaning towards Denis Buzukja, with a 55% probability over Connor Matthews' 45%. I predict Denis Buzukja will get the job done here, even though he struggled previously. I'm basing this on the fact that Buzukja is the younger fighter, he absorbs less strikes per minute, and has a solid takedown defense. I think that gives him the slight edge, but I can see this fight going back and forth on the feet and on the ground. While Matthews has the advantage in strike output and accuracy, Buzukja's ability to defend and implement takedowns could be a key factor. I think Buzukja gets the decision victory, but I'm not too confident on this one. This might be a decent value bet to consider, and for you to go to Connor Matthews instead. I couldn't tell you who would win more fights out of 10 fights, but bottom line, I think Denis Buzukja gets the job done here. In the next fight, we have Julio Arce versus Herbert Burns. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Julio Arce is from New York and is known for his sharp boxing and slick Muay Thai skills. He's got a reputation for putting on striking clinics, making the most of his diverse skill set to outmaneuver opponents. Then there's Herbert Burns, a Brazilian with a deep-rooted background in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, courtesy of the famous Burns family. Yes, that's correct. He's Gilbert Burns' younger brother. Herbert brings a high level of submission expertise to the table, often looking to take the fight to the ground where he can deploy his world-class grappling tactics. Each fighter brings a contrasting style to the octagon, promising an intriguing clash of techniques. Now let's take a look at their stats. Julio Arce stands at 5 feet 7 inches tall with a reach of 70 inches, and at 34 years old, his striking accuracy is at 36%, landing 4.38 significant strikes per minute while absorbing 3.10. He has a striking defense of 68%, but his takedown average per 15 minutes is fairly low at 0.49, with a takedown accuracy of 30%. However, he does excel in takedown defense at 95%. His submission average per 15 minutes is 0.4. Now, on the other hand, Herbert Burns is 5 feet 9 inches tall with a 73-inch reach and is 36 years old. He has a slightly lower significant strikes landed per minute rate at 1.61, but a higher striking accuracy at 51%. Burns absorbs more hits at 4.74 per minute and has a lower striking defense at 30%. He's more active in grappling with a takedown average of 3.92 and a higher takedown accuracy at 75%, along with a takedown defense of 60%. His submission average is significantly higher at 3.3. Now let's take a look at how Julio Arce has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Looking at the breakdown, Arce has a bit of a roller coaster with a win-loss pattern over his last 5 fights. Notably, he secured victories against Daniel Santos and Andre Ewell by unanimous decision in TKO KO, respectively, indicating his endurance in fights that go the distance as well as having the finishing power necessary to end fights early. However, his unanimous decision loss against Montel Jackson and his knockout loss against Song Yadong were both significant, and he was outstruck in both. This shows some vulnerability in Arce's game, particularly against fighters who can deliver a high volume of powerful strikes. Now let's take a look at how his opponent, Herbert Burns, has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Burns has a strong ground game with 2 wins by submission against Evan Dunham and Nate Landwehr, and even a knockout victory against Derek Minor. However, his last 2 fights resulted in losses to Bill Algeo and Daniel Pineda, with both ending in KO/TKOs. So while Burns is a threat on the ground, he's had weak performances against strikers that have finishing abilities and can keep the fight standing. Let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. The odds heavily favor Julio Arce, which is reflected in the odds probability of 80% to 20% against Herbert Burns. The predictive models unanimously lean towards Julio Arce. The linear regression and gradient boosting models are pretty close, favoring Arce just slightly. Other models have a stronger prediction for Arce. And when we combine the models together, the weighted prediction is a 63% probability for Julio Arce to win. My final prediction, which is slightly higher than the weighted predictions, is that Julio Arce actually has a 74% probability of defeating Herbert Burns, due to his defensive skills in both striking and takedowns and his consistent performance against varied opponents. The most likely method of victory will be by decision, considering Arce's tendency to engage in fights that last the distance and his ability to defend against takedowns, which will likely neutralize Burns' grappling advantage. In the next fight, we have Virna Jandiroba versus Loopy Godinez. Let me give you a brief introduction to these fighters. First up is Virna Jandiroba, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist known for her grappling skills. She's made a name for herself by securing wins with her ground game and is recognized for her technical submissions. On the other side, we've got Loopy Godinez, a Mexican fighter with a wrestling background and a knack for high-paced striking. Godinez brings a relentless energy to her fights, pushing the action and testing her opponents' limits with her aggressive approach. Now let's take a look at their stats. Virna Jandiroba measures up at 5 feet 3 inches tall with a reach of 64 inches. At 35 years old, she demonstrates a tactical approach with a significant strikes per minute rate of 2.34 and a striking accuracy of 40%. Jandiroba absorbs slightly less than she lands, with a strikes absorbed per minute of 3.03 and has a moderate striking defense of 56%. Her grappling is strong, with a takedown average of 2.42 and a takedown defense of 73%, indicative of her ground game focus, complemented by a submission average of 1. On the other hand, Loopy Godinez stands an inch shorter at 5 feet 2 inches tall, but with a 61-inch reach at 30 years old. Godinez is the more aggressive striker with a strikes landed per minute rate of 4.31 and a slightly higher striking accuracy of 49%. She has a higher striking defense at 62%, but absorbs more strikes at a rate of 3.76. She has a takedown average of 3.39 at a 46% accuracy with her higher takedown defense. Loopy excels in the grappling department when you compare these two fighters. Her submission rate is slightly higher as well at 1.1. Now let's check out how Virna Jandiroba has performed in her most recent UFC fights. Jandiroba has a mixed record in her last 5 fights with 3 wins and 2 losses. Her wins against Marina Rodriguez and Angela Hill by unanimous decision demonstrate her endurance and ability to secure victories through full rounds. However, losses against Amanda Ribas and Mackenzie Dern, also by unanimous decision, suggest she can be outmatched in striking exchanges and grappling engagements. She's faced good talent in this division, so she has pretty good experience. Now let's check out how her opponent, Loopy Godinez, has performed in her most recent UFC fights. Godinez shows a string of victories, 4 in her last 5 fights, which includes a rear naked choke submission win over Elise Reed, and 3 decision victories that displayed her well-rounded skills and resilience. Her only loss in this period came from Angela Hill by unanimous decision, showing that she can be outpointed but not easily finished. However, that was back in August 2022 on the Vera vs. Cruz Fight Night card, and she still managed to outstrike Angela Hill. Let's see who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. 5 out of the 7 prediction models point towards Loopy Godinez, with only the gradient boosting and 1000 fight simulation models leaning towards Virna Jandiroba. The weighted prediction models point to a 59% probability of victory for Loopy Godinez. My final prediction also aligns with this prediction. I think that's a fair assessment given Godinez's recent success in dynamic fighting style. Jandiroba does have good grappling and submission skills. She'll be a challenging opponent for Loopy, but she'll still get the job done. I think with her higher strike output and defense, the more likely method of victory will be a decision for Godinez, considering she can keep a high pace going as she controls fights. I think Virna's skills will negate a finish from Godinez. In the next fight, we have Nate Landwehr versus Jamall Emmers. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Nate Landwehr is from the United States and brings an all-action, no-holds-barred style to the cage, known for his heart and ability to engage in thrilling exchanges. His fights are a testament to his grit and determination, always pushing the pace and looking for the finish. Jamall Emmers, also from the United States, contrasts with a versatile approach, blending slick striking with effective wrestling. Emmers' ability to adapt to his opponent's strengths and weaknesses makes him a challenging opponent, capable of controlling the fight both standing up and on the ground. Together, Landwehr and Emmers promise a dynamic and exciting matchup, each with their own path to victory. Now let's take a look at their stats. Nate Landwehr stands at 5 feet 9 inches tall with a 72-inch reach and is 35 years old. He brings a high-volume approach with a significant strikes per minute rate of 6.14 and a striking accuracy of 46%. Landwehr absorbs 5.58 strikes per minute, which can be risky, but he has a decent striking defense at 55%. His ground game is not as prominent, with a takedown average of 1.07 and a takedown accuracy of 41%, but he impresses with a takedown defense of 86% and a notable submission average of 1.1. Jamall Emmers, an inch taller at 5 feet 10 inches with a longer 74-inch reach, is a year younger at 34 years old. Emmers lands slightly fewer strikes per minute at 5.1, but with a slightly higher accuracy of 48%. He absorbs fewer strikes than Landwehr with a rate of 3.79 and has a striking defense of 57%. His ground game statistics are better in some aspects, such as his takedown average being at 1.96 at a similar accuracy of 40%, with a slightly higher takedown defense of 90%. He also has a lower submission average at 0.2. Now let's check out how Nate Landwehr has performed in his most recent UFC fights. He's had a bit of a mix of results with 3 wins and 2 losses. The victories include submissions by rear naked choke and anaconda choke and a majority decision, demonstrating his ability to finish fights on the ground as well as going the distance. However, his recent loss to Dan Ige by unanimous decision shows that he can be outpointed over the course of a fight. Dan Ige was a big test for him. He also lost to Julio Rosa back in February 2021. He has a vulnerability with strikers that can effectively and strategically utilize their skills. Now let's check out how his opponent, Jamall Emmers, has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Emmers' recent performances have been a mix, with 3 wins and 2 losses in a checkered pattern. His latest fight resulted in a win by KO/TKO against Denis Buzukja, highlighting his knockout capability. His unanimous decision victory over Hussein Askabov showed his endurance and ability to outstrike his opponent, while the submission loss to Pat Sabatini via heel hook suggests potential vulnerabilities on the ground. Let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. 5 of the 7 prediction models lean towards Jamall Emmers, with confident strengths ranging from 52 to 74%. The neural network model and the 1000 fight simulation models point towards Landwehr, likely picking up on his high volume and the combination of a slightly better takedown accuracy and submission average as key factors in this fight. When we weigh the models together, Jamall Emmers has a 55% probability of victory. My final prediction gives Emmers a slightly more confident prediction at 59% based on Emmers' balanced striking and superior takedown defense, which counters Landwehr's high output and grappling threat. The most likely method of victory could be a decision in favor of Emmers due to his more efficient striking and defensive grappling. In the next fight, we have Chidi Njokuani versus Rhys. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Chidi Njokuani, coming from the United States, is celebrated for his striking, particularly his precision and power in Muay Thai. His approach is to keep the fight on the feet, where he can leverage his reach and striking skills to outclass his opponent. On the other hand, Rhys from Northern Ireland brings a well-rounded skill set with a notable ability to mix it up between striking and grappling. McKee is known for his heart and versatility, often seen pushing the pace and looking to finish fights whether standing or on the mat. Njokuani and McKee both enter the cage with distinct styles and strengths, setting the stage for an interesting fight. Now let's take a look at their stats. Chidi stands at an imposing 6 feet 3 inches tall, boasting an 80-inch reach at the age of 35. His striking is quite proficient with a significant strike per minute rate of 4.04 and an impressive striking accuracy of 60%. His defense highlights that he has a strikes absorbed per minute rate of 3.19 and a striking defense of 53%. Njokuani shows no takedown average and no takedown accuracy, indicating a more striking-focused approach with limited grappling engagement. His takedown defense is substantial at 67%, complemented by a modest submission average of 0.3. Rhys McKee stands at an inch shorter at 6 feet 2 inches tall, with a slightly lesser reach of 78 inches at the younger age of 28. McKee presents a higher strikes landed per minute rate at 6.06, but with a lower striking accuracy at 48%. He absorbs significantly more strikes at 9.47 per minute and has a lower striking defense at 44%, which is concerning. Also, his takedown defense is lower at 33%. Now let's check out how Chidi Njokuani has performed in his most recent UFC fights. His fight record displays a mix with 2 wins and 3 consecutive losses. Njokuani's knockout power is evident, with both wins coming by KO/TKO, one by punches and one by elbows, stopping Dusko Todorovic and Marc-Andre Barriault impressively in the first round. However, recent back-to-back losses, including a knockout by Michael Olejniczak and a decision against Albert Duraev, show some vulnerability. He's not very consistent, but he lays it all on the line, with a kill or be killed mentality. Now let's check out how his opponent, Rhys McKee, has performed in his most recent UFC fights. McKee's last 3 fights resulted in losses, demonstrating concerning challenges at this level of competition. Despite a high output of strikes, as seen against Alex Morono, McKee has struggled to secure a win. All 3 losses include him being taken down. He was finished in his fight against Khamzat Chimaev back in July 2020 and then faced 2 back-to-back unanimous decision losses. That quick knockout loss to Khamzat Chimaev within the first round raises concerns about his ability to handle powerful and overwhelming strikers, which could be problematic against someone like Njokuani. Let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. The prediction models largely favor Njokuani, with 5 of 7 models leaning in his favor. Some models had particularly strong confidence, such as Logistics Regression and the Support Vector Machines models, having a whopping confidence of 99 and 97%, indicating a belief in his striking ability and finish rate. However, the neural network models actually favor McKee, suggesting that his high-volume striking could be a game changer. When you weigh all of the models together, the models confidently predict Njokuani to win with a 69% probability. My final prediction is slightly lower than the weighted models, and I say that Njokuani has a 66% probability of defeating McKee. Considering Njokuani's striking accuracy and finishing power, contrasted against McKee's tendency to absorb significant strikes, the most likely method of victory could be a knockout in favor of Njokuani. Next fight, we have Bill Algeo versus Kyle Nelson. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Bill Algeo, from the United States, is known for his relentless pace and versatile attack, combining striking with a solid ground game. He thrives in chaos, making every fight an exciting spectacle by pushing forward and engaging his opponents in all areas of the fight. Across the cage, Kyle Nelson is from Canada, and he showcases a powerful striking game complemented by durable grappling skills. Nelson has a knack for explosive moments, whether it's landing a heavy punch or executing a timely takedown, making him a threat at any point in the fight. Algeo and Nelson both bring a blend of skill and heart into the octagon, promising a match filled with action and determination. Now let's take a look at their stats. Bill Algeo stands at 6 feet tall with a reach of 73 inches and is 34 years old. He impresses with a significant strike per minute rate of 6.11 and a striking accuracy of 52%. Algeo absorbs more than he lands with a strikes absorbed per minute rate of 4.41 and a slightly lower striking defense at 47%. His ground game is moderate with a takedown average of 0.89 and a takedown accuracy of 46%. Algeo's submission average is low at 0.10. Kyle Nelson, just an inch shorter at 5 feet 11 inches and with a 71-inch reach, is 2 years younger at 32 years old. He has a lower strikes landed per minute rate at 3.46 and a lower striking accuracy of 44%. Nelson takes more hits than Algeo with a rate of 4.56, but has a better defense against strikes at 52%. His takedown game is stronger with a takedown average of 1.15, but a lower takedown accuracy at 20%. Nelson's takedown defense is robust at 73%, and his submission average is higher at 0.7. Now let's check out how Bill Algeo has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Algeo has shown consistency with 4 wins out of his last 5 fights. His most recent victory over Alexander Hernandez by unanimous decision demonstrates his ability to go the distance and engage effectively in striking. Notably, he also secured a rear naked choke submission win over TJ Brown, showcasing his versatility. However, a split decision loss to Andre Fili back in September 2022 indicates his fights can be closely contested sometimes, especially against effective grapplers who can control fights. Now let's check out how his opponent, Kyle Nelson, has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Nelson's recent history is a bit more mixed, with 2 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw in his last 5 fights. Recently, he's had back-to-back wins, defeating a talented Fernando Padilla and Blake Bilder, both by unanimous decisions. He has shown he can go the distance with unanimous decision victories, but has also suffered a fast knockout loss to Billy Quarantillo, which might be a concern against a striker like Algeo. Let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. 6 out of the 7 prediction models overall favor Bill Algeo, with a particular lean from the Support Vector Machines model and the 1000 Fight Simulations model, which gives him an 88 and 85% chance of winning respectively. This confidence stems from Algeo's high striking rate and recent performance momentum. When you weigh all of the prediction models together, they all lean towards Algeo at 67%. My final prediction is similar at 66% probability for Bill Algeo to win. Algeo has the edge due to his aggressive striking and proven ability to finish fights. Considering all factors, including Algeo's high work rate and Nelson's susceptibility to knockouts, a decision win or a striking finish is likely for Algeo. In the next fight, we have Nursulton Ruziboev versus Cedriques Dumas. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Nursulton Ruziboev comes from Uzbekistan and is celebrated for his grappling and submission skills, making him a challenging force on the ground. He's got a knack for taking his opponents down and keeping them there, working towards a finish with calculated pressure and technique. On the other side, we have Cedriques Dumas from the United States, who brings a dynamic striking game to the table, coupled with agility and an ability to deliver knockout power. Dumas is known for his ability to move well inside the cage, creating angles for his strikes and keeping his opponents guessing. Ruziboev and Dumas offer a compelling clash of styles, with the potential for an explosive encounter. Now let's take a look at their stats. Nursulton Ruziboev is 30 years old and he towers at 6 feet 5 inches tall with a 76-inch reach. It's important to note that his stats only come from one fight, which was against Bruno Ferreira at UFC Fight Night Strickland vs. Magomedov in July 2023. In that fight, he showcased impressive stats, including a significant strike per minute rate of 4.68 and a striking accuracy of 66%. He has a strong takedown average of 11.69 and a good takedown accuracy as well. He absorbs 2.34 strikes per minute, paired with a 40% striking defense. On the other side, we have 28-year-old Cedriques Dumas at 6 feet 2 inches tall with a reach of 79 inches. Dumas strikes less frequently at 1.88 strikes landed per minute and has a striking accuracy of 49%. He absorbs more strikes than he lands at 2.01, but boasts a better striking defense at 56%. Dumas's ground game indicates he has a takedown average of 0.77 with a takedown accuracy of 50%, and he has a higher submission average of 0.4 compared to Ruziboev. Now let's check out how Nursulton Ruziboev has performed in that one fight against Bruno Ferreira. He got the KO/TKO in round 1, indicating he has explosive power. Even though he's 30, he has a ton of experience in MMA. His total record is 35 wins, 8 losses, and 2 draws. 13 of his wins came from KO/TKOs, and 20 of his wins came from submissions. Most of his losses were from decisions, but he was finished twice, once via submission and once via KO/TKO. He has well-rounded skills, and he's able to finish fights on the ground or with strikes, and has finished 33 of his 35 wins. That's insane. Now let's check out how his opponent, Cedriques Dumas, has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Dumas shows a mix of outcomes with 3 wins and 1 loss. He won both of his latest fights by unanimous decision, showcasing his endurance and tactical performance throughout the full rounds. However, he did suffer a submission loss to Josh Fremd via guillotine choke, suggesting that while he may have some submission skills of his own, he may be vulnerable on the ground. His total record is 9 wins and 1 loss. He finished 6 of his 9 wins, with 4 via KO/TKO and 2 via submissions. His only loss was to Josh Fremd via submission. Let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. The models are all leaning towards Ruziboev, with most models giving him over a 70% chance of winning. The support vector machines and the 1000 fight simulations especially favor him, with predictions of 84% and 81% respectively. These models are factoring in his successful takedown strategy and striking accuracy. When we weigh the models together, we get a prediction towards Raziboev at 72%. My final prediction is in line with the models for this fight. I think Raziboev gets it done, considering Raziboev's demonstrated striking ability and Dumas's susceptibility to submissions. I see Raziboev getting the knockout with his high strikes landed per minute rate, his higher striking accuracy, and his impressive performance in his last fight. In the next fight, we have Chris Weidman versus Bruno Silva. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Chris Weidman, from the United States, has earned respect for his wrestling background and powerful ground game as a veteran of MMA, which he's seamlessly integrated with striking to become a well-rounded athlete. Known for his strategic approach to fights, Weidman has excelled in dictating the pace and exploiting his opponent's weaknesses. On the other side, Bruno Silva is from Brazil and is a striking specialist, with a particular ability in delivering devastating blows that have the power to end fights abruptly. Silva's aggressive stand-up game and knockout power make him a constant threat to any opponent standing across from him. Both Weidman and Silva have made their marks with distinct fighting styles, setting up an intriguing matchup that fans are eagerly anticipating. Now let's take a look at their stats. Chris Weidman stands at an impressive 6 feet 2 inches tall with a reach advantage at 78 inches, towering over Bruno Silva, who is at 6 feet tall with a 74-inch reach. Age is on Silva's side. He's 34, 5 years younger than Weidman at 39. Weidman's significant strikes per minute and striking accuracy are lower than Silva's at 2.98 strikes landed per minute, with a 43% accuracy, compared to Silva's 4.43 strikes landed per minute and a 51% striking accuracy. Weidman absorbs less strikes at 3.27 with a 50% striking defense, while Silva absorbs a much higher 5.33 strikes per minute with a lower 43% striking defense. Weidman excels in grappling with a higher takedown average at 3.6 and a decent takedown defense at 65%, whereas Silva averages 1.09 for takedowns and has a stronger takedown defense at 73%. Weidman also has a modest 0.8 submission average. Now let's check out how Chris Weidman has performed in his most recent UFC fights. It's been a rough patch for Weidman, unfortunately, suffering 4 losses in his last 5 fights. 2 of those were first-round knockouts to Uriah Hall and Dominic Reyes, which were tough setbacks for the former champ and fighting veteran. He was also knocked out by Jakari Souza back in 2018. However, he did pull off a unanimous decision win against Omari Akhmedov, which was back in August 2020, displaying his ability to go the distance and utilize his wrestling background to secure a victory on the scorecards. He has the skills and experience to win, but his age and injuries are playing against him, unfortunately. Now let's check out how his opponent, Bruno Silva, has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Silva's recent fight shows volatility as well, with 4 losses and 1 win. Notably, his victory was a knockout against Brendan Allen, demonstrating his striking power. His losses, 2 by decision and 2 by submissions, show some susceptibility, particularly on the ground, which could be an interesting factor against a wrestler like Weidman. I honestly don't have very high expectations for this fight, and I would strongly advise that you guys don't keep high expectations either. Let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. The models are divided in their predictions. Although 4 out of 7 models favor Weidman, Bruno's 3 models are more confident. When we weigh the models together, they point to a 58% probability for Silva to beat Weidman, which is significant but not overwhelming. My final prediction is higher at 64%, based on him being 5 years younger, which usually may not seem too significant, but 39 versus 34 makes a huge difference, especially with the injuries that Weidman has faced. Bruno's striking is also more active and accurate, and I don't think Weidman has the defense that he once had. Considering everything, including Silva's striking power and takedown defense, I believe he keeps the fight standing and outstrikes Weidman. I could see Weidman taking him to the ground in a messy scramble after being damaged, but then I see Silva popping back up and continuing his strikes. Silva gets it done here, and the fight goes the distance to the judges. In the next fight, we have Vicente Luque versus Joaquin Buckley. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Vicente Luque, with roots in Brazil, is celebrated for his striking ability and finishing instincts. His fights are often marked by aggressive exchanges and a willingness to engage in battles that thrill fans. Joaquin Buckley, from the United States, burst onto the scene with dynamic striking and highlight reel knockouts. Known for his power and athleticism, Buckley's approach to fighting is both explosive and entertaining, making him a must-watch competitor. Both Luque and Buckley bring an exciting blend of skill and determination to the octagon, promising a clash that's packed with action. Now let's take a look at their stats. We have Vicente Luque standing at 5 feet 11 inches tall with a 75-inch reach, while Joaquin Buckley is a touch shorter at 5 feet 10 inches tall and has a 76-inch reach. Luque, at 32 years old, presents a higher significant strikes per minute rate of 5.17 with a striking accuracy of 52%. His strikes absorbed per minute is nearly identical to his strikes landed per minute, and he defends against strikes with a 52% success rate. Luque's ground game stats show a takedown average of 1.04 with a high takedown accuracy of 60%, though his submission average is modest at 0.7. Buckley, at 29 years old, has a lower strikes landed per minute rate at 3.87, but a notable takedown average of 1.51. His striking accuracy is less at 33%, but he absorbs less strikes per minute at 3.31 compared to Vicente Luque's 5.15. His takedown accuracy is less impressive at 36%, but his takedown defense is commendable at 65%, and he has yet to average a submission in his fights. Now let's check out how Vicente Luque has performed in his most recent UFC fights. Luque comes off a win against former champion Rafael dos Anjos with a unanimous decision. However, his two previous fights were losses, one against Geoff Neal by knockout and another unanimous decision loss against Belal Muhammad. Before that, Luque secured 2 submissions against Michael Chiesa and Tyrone Woodley, both which were via Darce chokes, showing his capacity to finish fights with his grappling skills. He's a talented fighter that has faced big names in MMA. Now let's take a look at his opponent, Joaquin Buckley, and how he performed in his most recent UFC fights. Buckley's record shows a mixed bag with 3 wins and 2 losses. His victories against Alex Morono and Andre Fialho were by unanimous decisions and a KO/TKO, indicating his ability to sustain performance across rounds while having finishing abilities as well. Notably, he also KO/TKO'd Albert Duraev. However, he has faced losses to Chris Curtis via knockout and a unanimous decision loss to Nasiruddin Imavov. Joaquin Buckley is a powerful striker that you have to be cautious with when you're engaging. Let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final predictions. 5 of 7 of the prediction models lean towards Joaquin Buckley, with only 2 favoring Vicente Luque. The most confident models are the neural network and gradient boosting models, giving Buckley a 73 and 68% probability respectively. Vicente Luque is just slightly favored by the linear regression model by 0.08 of a decimal point and was favored by the fight simulation model by 65%. When you weigh the models together, they give Buckley a 59% probability of victory. My final prediction is the opposite of the models though. I'm leaning towards Vicente Luque with a narrow margin of winning. Considering Luque's versatility and submission ability, contrasting with Buckley's knockout tendency as seen in the Chris Curtis fight, I give Luque the edge. He can pour the volume on with a higher accuracy or even land takedowns at a high accuracy as well. Luque gets the finish, probably by KO/TKO. This will be a fun and closely contested fight. I do respect Buckley's fighting ability and skill set, but Luque also has good experience with better fighters. In our next fight, we have our main event, Erin Blanchfield versus Manon Fiorot. Let me give you a brief introduction to each of these fighters. Erin Blanchfield comes from the United States and has quickly made a name for herself with a well-rounded skill set that shines brightest on the ground. Her grappling and submission game are top-notch, often leading her to dominate her opponents when the fight hits the mat. On the other side, we have Manon Fiorot from France, who has impressed fans with her striking ability and her agility. Known as the Beast, Fiorot's ability to control the distance and unleash powerful strikes has made her a formidable force in the stand-up game. Both Blanchfield and Fiorot bring a high level of expertise and determination to the octagon, promising an intriguing matchup with contrasting styles and title implications. Now let's take a look at their stats. Starting with Erin Blanchfield, who stands at 5 feet 4 inches tall and has a reach of 66 inches. At 24 years old, she shows a significant strikes per minute rate at 5.58 and a striking accuracy of 52%. Her striking defense is solid at 62%, but her takedown accuracy sits lower at 36%. However, Blanchfield shines in takedown defense, boasting an 83% rate. Her submission average per 15 minutes is 1.2. Moving on to Manon Fiorot, she's a bit taller at 5 feet 7 inches tall with a slightly shorter reach of 65 inches. At 34 years of age, Fiorot has a higher strikes landed per minute rate at 6.05 and a lower striking accuracy of 39%. What stands out for Fiorot is her striking defense, coming in at an impressive 69%, and her takedown defense is even more remarkable at 91%. Now let's check out how Erin Blanchfield has performed in her most recent UFC fights. She's on an impressive winning streak and has won 5 of her last 5 fights. Her last fight against Taila Santos ended in a unanimous decision after 3 rounds, showcasing her endurance. Blanchfield's win against Jessica Andrade stands out due to a submission via a rear naked choke in the 2nd round, underlining her grappling skills. 2 more submission wins against Molly McCann and JJ Aldrich further highlight her proficiency on the ground. The victory over Miranda Maverick by unanimous decision demonstrates her capability to go the distance and her tactical ability throughout the full fight's duration. Now let's check out how her opponent, Manon Fiorot, has performed in her most recent UFC fights. Fiorot also boasts a series of wins, with 4 of her recent 5 wins ending in a unanimous decision victory, and she even KO/TKO'd Tabitha Ricci. She has the ability to control the pace and dominate throughout. Her fight metrics show a balance between striking and grappling, and that's what makes this fight really interesting and gives it high stakes. Both fighters have been doing really well. Let's review who the prediction models picked to win this fight, the weighted results, and my final prediction. 5 of 7 of the prediction models lean towards Erin Blanchfield, with only 2 favoring Manon Fiorot. Both fighters have 1 model each that gives them a really high probability of winning, which means their stats hold key values against each other. When you weigh the models together, you get a narrow 52% probability for Manon Fiorot to emerge victorious. However, I'm going opposite of the models here and giving Erin Blanchfield a narrow 53% probability of victory instead. Although this fight is up for grabs by either fighter, as they both are capable of getting the job done, Blanchfield has superior grappling, landing twice as many takedowns, and she also has a submission history along with a high takedown defense. I don't think Manon Fiorot could out-grapple her or out-strike her, which narrows down her options. Erin is also the much younger fighter at 10 years younger. She's not even at the peak of her career yet. She also has a 1-inch greater reach. Because of all of these things and more, Erin Blanchfield will defeat Manon Fiorot via submission, leveraging her grappling advantages and her past performance experiences. That, or she'll get the decision victory. Bottom line, Erin Blanchfield takes this one. And with that, those are all of the fights for UFC Fight Night Blanchfield vs. Fiorot. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, as it will help keep me motivated in creating these videos. Running this data and analysis and the prediction models and charts and graphs takes hours every day and week, so I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you all, and see you all in the next one.